The first warning I got about County Road 6 came from a gas station cashier who looked a little too tired to be making things up. I was standing at the counter outside Morrow Creek just after midnight, buying burnt coffee and a plastic-wrapped breakfast sandwich, when she glanced at the route on my phone and said, "You don't want to take that road tonight." I looked up. She was maybe 50, maybe older, with nicotine yellow fingertips and the kind of face that seemed permanently folded into suspicion. Reading glasses hung from a beaded chain against a sweatshirt 2 sizes too big for her. She didn't say it like a joke or a local trying to unsettle a traveler. She said it like she was mentioning black ice. "Why not?" I asked. "Road's bad." "How bad?" She shrugged. "Bad enough." I looked back at the map. County Road 6 cut 30 minutes off the drive to Dalton Ridge, and after 9 hours behind the wheel, I wasn't in the mood to surrender 30 minutes to nobody's vague, small-town superstition. "I've got 4-wheel drive," I said. "That won't matter." Something in the way she said it made me hesitate. Outside, rain ticked softly against the windows. Not a real storm yet. Just the kind of thin, cold rain that turns highways slick and soaks your cuffs the second you step in it. The lot beyond the glass was almost empty except for my truck and an old farm pickup losing its fight with rust. Farther out, the road vanished into black fields. I smiled politely. "Construction?" She slid my coffee across the counter. "If you have to take it," she said, "don't stop for anything you see in the road." The lid flexed in my hand. I waited for her to smile. She didn't. I laughed once because there didn't seem to be any other acceptable response. "Anything?" "Anything." "Deer too?" She looked at me dead in the face. "If it's standing in the road waiting on you, it ain't a deer." An old man by the coffee station turned his head a little when she said that, but he didn't join in. He just stood there, stirring powdered creamer into a paper cup, looking down like he'd heard the conversation before. I should tell you now that I didn't believe any of it. Not really. I believed in exhausted people, local folklore, and stretches of county road with enough accents behind them to grow stories. I believed the cashier probably knew some ugly piece of county road history and had learned to compress it into a warning dramatic enough that even strangers might remember it. I didn't believe there was something on the road waiting for me. If I had, I probably wouldn't have gotten out of the truck. My name is Owen Mercer. At the time, I hauled medical equipment across 3 states for a distributor based out of Kansas City. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid better than the warehouse jobs I burned through in my 20s, and it kept me moving. Some people need routine. I'd had enough of it to know it didn't fix much. I'd been divorced almost a year. Half my life happened in motel rooms and truck stops by then. The other half in a 1-bedroom apartment that never felt occupied long enough to count as home. Driving suited me. Road noise gave my thoughts something to lean against. The delivery in Dalton Ridge was scheduled for 6:30 the next morning. County Road 6 saved time. That was the whole equation. I took the coffee, thanked the cashier, and headed for the door. Just before I stepped outside, she said, "If something asks for help, keep driving." I didn't answer. I just gave a half wave and went into the rain. Morrow Creek disappeared behind me in less than 5 minutes. It wasn't much of a town to begin with. Gas station, grain co-op, shutter diner, church with one floodlight over the sign, but once the highway bent east and the last street lamp dropped away, The darkness seemed to rise off the fields and swallow everything at once. County Road 6 branched off the main route beside a leaning mailbox and a green sign half buried in weeds. The pavement narrowed almost immediately. No center line. Trees crowding close on both sides. Utility poles running along the ditch like crooked teeth. Rain whispering over the windshield. I turned onto it at 12:24 a.m. For the first few miles, it was just a road. Wet pavement, soybean fields, fence lines, reflectors blinking back in the headlights, tires hissing over shallow water, the cab smelling like coffee and damp canvas from my jacket. The kind of empty rural night that makes you understand how people start believing strange things. At 12:37, my GPS froze. The map stayed on screen, but the blue arrow stopped moving even though I was still driving. The distance to the destination didn't change. Then the road name vanished altogether. I tapped the screen. Nothing. A second later, the display flickered, reset to a blank grid, then reloaded with my truck shown several miles off the road in a patch of black nothing. Great, I muttered, and tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. Signal in places like that comes and goes. I'd seen worse, but the timing was enough to bring the cashier's warning back into my head, and with it, the first faint edge of irritation. A mile later, I passed the first house. At least, I thought it was a house. It sat back from the road behind a wall of untrimmed trees. Its porch sagging toward the mud, one upstairs window catching my headlights like a flat pale eye. No lights on. No vehicles outside. The yard had gone wild long enough to swallow the front walk. Still, as I passed, I had the strong sudden impression that someone was standing on the porch, not moving, just watching the truck go by. I checked the mirror, but the house was already gone behind rain and dark. The road kept feeling narrower. I know that doesn't make sense on paper. A road is a road, but that's how it felt. The ditches seemed closer. The trees leaned in harder. The dark between the trunks thickened until it no longer felt like open land with woods on both sides. It felt enclosed. At 12:51, I saw the first figure. It stood in the field to my right about 50 yards off the road, exactly at the edge where the headlights began to lose shape. Human-sized, too thin. And for a second I thought it was a scarecrow. Then the truck moved a little farther forward and I realized it was facing me. Not turning toward me, already facing me. I slowed without meaning to. The figure didn't move. Rain silvered the hood. The wipers went back and forth. The thing in the field stayed where it was. Tall and narrow and dark enough to disappear if I looked at it too directly. Then the truck passed and the trees took it away. I told myself it had been fence post geometry, a trick of distance and wet glass. Night roads are full of half-seen things. If you drive enough of them, you'll learn not to dignify every shadow with a name. Still, my hand tightened on the wheel. At 12:58, the radio died. I had an AM station on low for company, one of those overnight shows where truckers complain about fuel prices and insomniacs calling to describe weather systems moving across counties nobody else has heard of. Without warning, the host's voice dissolved into static, and then into something else. Not speech exactly, a rhythm inside the static. Pulsing, wet, almost like breathing too close to the microphone. I changed the station. More static. Changed it again. Same thing. Every frequency was occupied by the same dry, hissing wash with the faint pulse underneath. So I shut it off. The silence that followed was immediate and complete. A minute later, I saw headlights behind me. Just one pair, far back around a bend. I remember feeling relieved. Another vehicle meant another person on the road, which made the whole county road warning shrink back to the size it deserved. I checked the mirror every few seconds, expecting the lights to gain on me. They never did. They stayed the same distance back, steady and level, matching my speed exactly through the curves. I sped up, and they stayed with me. I slowed down, same distance. Then the road dipped between trees and the headlights vanished behind their eyes. I waited for them to reappear. They didn't. I checked the mirror until my eyes hurt. Nothing but wet black road. By then I wasn't irritated anymore. Just uneasy in the way you get when enough small things go wrong that your mind starts building a shape around them. At 1:07 a.m., I saw someone standing in the road. He was maybe 80 yards ahead when the headlights found him. A man in a dark jacket, bent slightly at the waist, one arm hanging wrong at his side. He stood in the middle of my lane facing away from me, head lowered as if he'd been walking and stopped when he heard the engine. I hit the brakes hard enough to send the coffee tumbling into the passenger footwell. The truck fishtailed once on the wet pavement before straightening. I stopped maybe 20 feet from him. He didn't flinch. For a few seconds, I just sat there with both hands locked on the wheel and my pulse hammering in my throat. And then I thought, drunk? Or injured? Or both? The cashier's warning came back with irritating clarity. If something asks for help, keep driving. I almost laughed at myself then, because the thing in front of me was obviously a person. A stranded local, maybe hit by a car, maybe in shock. Normal explanations came rushing back all at once. Embarrassed I had let them wander off. I rolled the window down 2 inches. "Hey," I called. "You okay?" The man didn't turn around. Rain pattered through the narrow opening onto the door panel. "Sir?" Nothing. I looked past him down the road, expecting hazard lights in a ditch or a wrecked truck in the weeds. There was nothing. No vehicle, no driveway, no mailbox. Just wet black road disappearing between trees. I should have driven around him. Instead, I put the truck in park. Even now, I can tell you exactly why. Because helping a hurt stranger is a reflex most of us are taught before we understand danger. Because every story about a man who drove away from someone in need sounds unforgivable right up until the moment you imagine yourself in his place. Because once your mind decides what it's looking at is human, your whole body arranges itself around that belief. I grabbed the flashlight from the console, opened the door, and stepped into the rain. Cold hit first, and then the smell. Wet asphalt, mud from the ditches, crushed weeds. And beneath that, something sour and animal, rank as roadkill opened in summer heat. "Sir?" I called again. He was maybe 10 feet away now. He still hadn't turned. Rain flattened the jacket against the back so narrow it looked wrong, as if there was less body inside the clothes than there should have been. His pants were soaked dark from the knees down. One shoe was missing. The bare foot looked gray in the headlights. "You hurt?" He made a sound then. Not a word. A low, wet intake of breath. I took one more step and raised the flashlight. That was when I noticed his legs. They weren't broken. They weren't bent. They were just too long. Not absurdly, not at first glance. Just wrong enough that my brain had rounded the image into something acceptable, until distance and darkness stopped helping. The joints sat too high, the lower legs were too narrow. The bare foot pressing into the road had too many joints touching the asphalt. My mouth went dry. "Sir?" The head tilted slightly, and then stopped. And in that pause before he turned, I felt something happen inside of me I've never felt before or since. A total animal certainty that I was not looking at a man and never had been. He began to turn, slowly, not with natural shift of shoulders and hips, more like an object rotating on a stand. Left shoulder first, then the chest, then the neck. Its face entered the flashlight beam in pieces, a cheek too pale to belong to living skin, a mouth hanging slack and dark, one eye reflecting white, then all of it at once. It had the arrangement of a human face, eyes above nose, nose above mouth, but every part of that arrangement was wrong, as if it had been assembled from memory. The face was too long and hairless. The skin stretched shiny over something that moved beneath it. The mouth sagged wider on one side than the other, and the teeth inside were too small and too crowded, like a child's teeth jammed into an adult's jaw. Its eyes were huge and colorless in the light, both of them reflecting that dead animal brightness you see on the roadside at night. The worst part was the expression. Not anger, not hunger. Expectation. As if this was the moment it had been waiting for, and we both knew it. It smiled. The mouth opened too far. Then, in a voice that sounded like several people trying to use the same throat, it said, "Can you help me?" I stumbled backwards so hard my boots slipped on the wet pavement and nearly took me down. The thing twitched toward me. Not a step. A collapse and reassembly of limbs so quick and wrong I barely tracked it. I turned and ran for the truck. Something hit the road beside me with a wet smack, and then another, and then another. Too fast and too many to belong to human feet. I threw myself into the cab, slammed the door, and hit the lock at the exact moment something struck the outside hard enough to rock the whole truck. The passenger side window exploded. Glass sprayed across the seat. A hand or something wearing the shape of one came through. Long gray fingernails snapping blindly in the air where my face had been a second earlier. I jammed the truck in the drive and floored it. The tires spun, caught, and hurled the truck forward. For one impossible instant, the thing stayed with me, loping beside the passenger door with its head level to the window, one pale arm slapping against the truck, its mouth still pulled open in that huge, broken smile. Then the rear wheels hit a wash on the road, the truck fishtailed, and it was gone. I didn't look in the mirrors. I drove. Rain hammered the broken window frame. Wind tore through the cab. Every branch leaning over the road became a reaching arm. Every reflector looked like an eye. The truck bounced over bad pavement and drifted across the lane more than once, but I kept it moving because every nerve in my body was screaming the same thing. Do not stop. At 114, shapes appeared along both sides of the road. Not one, several. Tall, narrow figures standing back among the trees and fence posts, spaced unevenly along the ditches, some close, some farther off, all facing the road, watching. I don't know if they'd been there the whole time. I don't know if they moved. I only know that once I saw the first one, I started seeing them everywhere the headlights swept, between trees, at field gates, beside mailboxes, in old driveways swallowed by weeds, waiting for me to slow down. Then something white flashed ahead in the middle of the road. For half a second it looked like a child's bicycle laying on its side with one wheel turning. I swerved on instinct. At the last second my headlights caught it fully, and I saw there was no bicycle, just a shape built to suggest one from a distance. 2 white circles, thin metal-like lines, something pale draped across the center. I clipped it with the right front tire. There was a crunch, and then a violent thump under the chassis like I'd run over a deer carcass. The truck jerked hard left. I fought the wheel and nearly lost it in the ditch. When I got it straight again, laughter came through the broken window from somewhere outside. High, thin, all around me. At 119, I saw the highway sign ahead. State 48, 2 miles. It wasn't big. It wasn't bright. It was just reflective enough to bloom in the headlights like a promise. The road widened a little. Trees thinned. The figures along the ditches fell away. I could feel space opening around the truck again. The landscape loosening. And with it came the first miserable flicker of hope. Then I saw the woman. She stood in the middle of the road about 100 yards ahead. Arms wrapped around herself as if freezing. Long dark hair, plastered to her face by rain. She wore what looked like a white nightgown or a hospital gown. She looked painfully, unmistakably human. She was sobbing. I could hear it even over the engine and the wind. Her shoulders shook, her knees bent. One hand lifted weakly toward me. Everything in me recoiled. I pressed harder on the gas. The truck surged. When the headlights reached her full on, she looked up. Her face was wrong before my mind could explain why. The eyes were too far apart. The mouth too low. The whole front of the head seemed to slide out of place. Features drifting where features should never drift. And then she smiled with that same enormous broken width as the thing in the road before. I hit her. Or what I thought was her. There was no impact like striking a body. Just a heavy rippling blow along both sides of the truck at once. Like wet canvas dragging over the cab from front to back. Something screeched across the roof. Then I was through. The highway appeared less than a minute later. Broad and empty and lined with reflective markers that looked so normal I almost cried. I blew through the stop sign at the junction, turned onto State 48, and drove another 7 miles before I pulled over beneath the lights of an all-night farm supply store. My whole body started shaking so hard I couldn't get the truck into park on the first try. I sat there with the engine running and the rain blowing through the broken passenger window and tried to decide whether I had just lost my mind. People say that like it's a figure of speech. It isn't. There is a real moment when your brain offers insanity as the kindest available explanation. I called 911. A state trooper met me 20 minutes later. His name was Bell, according to the patch on his rain jacket. He looked at the shattered window, the deep scratches along the passenger door, the denting near the rear panel, and asked what I had hit. "I don't know," I said. "That's not a useful answer." I looked at him for a long moment and decided I would rather sound drunk than truthful. "Something in the road," I said. "A person, maybe. Then maybe not." He studied my face. "Have you been drinking?" "No." "You look like hell." "I know." He took my statement in that careful official way people do when they think the truth is either less or more than what you're giving them. Another trooper drove back down County Road 6 to look for wrecks, injured pedestrians, anything I might have struck. He returned 40 minutes later with nothing. No body, no bicycle, no woman in white. Just broken glass near a long skid mark and something odd on the road further down. What kind of odd? I asked. The second trooper glanced at Bell before answering. Tracks. What kind of tracks? He shrugged. Not tire tracks. Bell told me I was free to go after they filed the report, but suggested I wait until daylight if I was as tired as I looked. I stayed in a motel off State 48 and missed the morning delivery. At 10 o'clock, after 2 hours of bad sleep and a hot shower that did nothing, I called the distributor, lied about a blown tire, and arranged a later drop. Then I drove back through Morrow Creek. In daylight, the gas station looked even smaller than it had at night. The cashier was there again behind the counter reading a tabloid. When she saw me walk in, her eyes dropped immediately to the cuts on my face. "You stopped," she said. It wasn't a question. I stood there in my wrinkled clothes with dry blood on my collar and felt something in me go completely still. There was someone in the road. She gave one short, humorless nod, like I had confirmed the weather. There usually is. The old man from the coffee station was there again, too, stirring powdered creamer into a cup. This time he spoke without looking at me. "They put signs up once," he said. "People kept taking them down." "What signs?" "Yellow warning signs," he told me. "County Road 6. Do not stop after dark." The county posted them after a run of accidents in the late 80s. Then livestock started turning up opened in the fields near the road. Then a deputy disappeared pulling over for what he thought was a stranded family. After that, the signs got stolen so often, the county stopped replacing them. I looked at the cashier. "And nobody closes the road?" She gave a dry little laugh. "Road still gets farmers through in daylight. School buses use the north stretch in the morning. County's not shutting down a road every time it grows teeth." I waited for one of them to smile. Neither did. "What is it?" I asked. The old man shook his head. "Road ain't the thing," he said. "Road's just where it stands." I left without finishing my coffee. That was 4 years ago. I don't drive nights anymore if I can help it. I changed routes, changed jobs eventually too. Shorter runs, more warehouses, less open country. I still dream about the thing in the road sometimes. Not the face, exactly. The pause before it turned. That moment when some part of me knew I was looking at an imitation and still hoped I was wrong. Most nights I can live with that. What I have more trouble living with is this. Last month, on my way home from St. Louis, I stopped at a rest area just before sunset. I was tired and needed coffee and had almost convinced myself to keep driving when I noticed a flyer taped crookedly to the vending machine. A missing person notice. Teenage boy, 17. Last seen 3 nights earlier. At the bottom, beneath the sheriff's number, someone had written a note in black marker. Last seen walking on Country Road 6. Do not stop if you see him. I stood there for a long time looking at the picture, because I recognized him. Not from town, not from the news, from my headlights. He had been standing in the field on the right side of the road at 12:51 in the morning, watching my truck go by. Thanks for listening to Midnight Delight. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next terrifying tale. Good night.